Yo people, hope you're all doing well and welcome to a new video. With patch 7.05 just over 2 weeks away, I thought it'd be a good time to go over some of the general preparations that I've been making from an overall perspective. Mainly I'll be covering methods that will benefit you if you're a crafter or a gatherer, but also I'll mention some general tips or pointers on things that you can look out for in order to capitalize and make some gil if that's what you're interested in. I will at some point make a full-on gil making video where I will outline what to invest in, what to stay away from, and also everything that I've invested in, similar to my previous videos, but this will be more focused on things you can get started on now to give you a general head start on release day. If you didn't already know, then patch 7.05 is when the Savage tier for Dawntrail will begin. What this means is that new recipes will be released for crafters, which will be unlockable through obtaining the new mastery books, which is basically what we've always seen before. You will have access to the new combat crafted gear, new foods, and also potions. Typically, these are the patches where there is a lot of money to be made, and if you think making money at the beginning of the expansion was good, then wait until you see how much can be made during the start of these raid tier patches, as long as you obviously prepare well. Now, please keep in mind, before taking my advice on anything regarding investment or items I'm stacking up on, we do not actually have any information on what stats or what items will be required for the new recipes. Everything that I'm doing in preparation is based on what we have seen in previous expansion patches and based on previous patterns and trends. If you check my previous videos, I have mostly had a big success rate on my preparations going really well. However, there are times that I have been wrong with an odd item here or there. So don't just copy the things that you see me stockpiling. It's best to do your own research, but I will mention why I'm doing what I'm doing. So firstly, this goes without saying, but I'd highly suggest that you make sure you are stocked up on both your tomes and your scripts before patch day. This includes orange scripts and purple scripts for both crafters and gatherers, and aesthetic tomestones for combat classes. The crafter books that I mentioned will most likely be purchasable using the purple scripts. So a really good way to get started is by stacking a retainer with collectibles to hand in on day one of the patch. It's really up to you on which purple script recipe you're going to use, but for me personally, I'm going to go with an easy option as it will be cheap and quick to make, and that will be the level 90 culinarian purple script hand-in from Endwalker. Yes, you can get double the script hand-ins if you focus on the level 99 collectible hand-ins, but you also spend a lot more money and also a lot more time in actually craft an item. So yeah, for me personally, I'll be sticking with the late Endwalker stuff. Keep it cheap and efficient. The orange scripts will be needed for the new ingredients or new materials that will be required for crafting the new foods and the potions. Some materials will be limited to only being obtainable by these vendors, and so depending on if you just want to make a lot of gil on day one or if you want to stockpile stuff yourself to use, the choice is yours. New materials will always be really expensive in the first 2 days, especially those that are obtainable by limited currency, for example scripts or tomes, and so will the food and the potions. You can pick what you decide to do with the scripts, but just make sure that you do stack on them so that you have the ability to get materials if needed. For gatherers, you are probably already stockpiling your orange scripts and your aether sands. If you haven't already done so, then it will be a good time to get started on these, as going by previous raid gear, we've always required an aether sand to craft the items. Now, which aether sand to collect is a bit of a hit or miss. What we know for certain is that the sunlit aether sands are used for the current potions, and so this means that they may be used for the grade 2 potions as well. But if I were you, I'd stockpile these equally and have a full stack of orange scripts for release day so that we can see which one will be the most in demand, so you can purchase a load of them on day one. For the purple scripts, something you should be doing in advance is getting your folklore books done. This is because unlocking these will give you access to the current high-end nodes. If you don't want to get all the folklore books, however, because you just can't be bothered, then it will be a good idea to stack up on the purple scripts just before patch day. This means that you'll be able to log in, see which nodes are mostly going to be in demand for the new gear, and then just get 2 of the folklore books which will unlock that node. But my honest advice is, if you want to make gil especially, then it will be good to set some time aside and just farm the collectibles that you can now. A huge tip, by the way, a really quick way to get purple scripts for gatherers is by focusing on the Dawntrail nodes and also focusing on the level 90 Endwalker nodes. A lot of people I know that were complaining initially about purple script farming for gatherers were only using the Dawntrail nodes at the time, which is actually a mistake because because the Endwalker nodes are easier to collect, especially if you're already at level 100. It gives you basically the same amount of purple scripts as Dawntrail nodes. If you have these on a timer, then you'll notice that you will end up having 2 nodes up at the same time, one from Dawntrail and one from Endwalker. So basically you're getting double the scripts that you would have been getting if you were only focusing on the Dawntrail nodes. So just keep that in mind. Now, the Tomestone of Aesthetics will be interesting because in the latest raid tier patch of Endwalker, we saw that for the first time we had to use Tomestones in order to acquire a material needed to craft the combat potions. This meant that those who solely focus on combat jobs still could make a lot of money throughout the patch, and not just at the start by selling these materials on the market board or to their crafter friends. If Square Enix go in the same direction, then it will be a good way to continue to make gil throughout the patch, as potions and food are always required. However, even if they don't introduce anything for foods and potions in the tome vendors, then there will still be other materials needed from the vendor for other crafts such as combat gear, etc., which is typically what we've always seen. So for the next section, we talk about gear and builds. One of the big questions right now is what builds we should use for our gatherers and our crafters. Personally, for crafters at this moment in time, I'm using really cheap builds. That's mainly because of 2 things. One, I can still craft everything available in the game right now with these builds whilst getting the maximum spirit bond speed. And 2, we don't know what stats are going to be required for the new recipes in 7.05. A big mistake people made at the end of Endwalker was spending millions on pentamelding their gear as soon as possible, to find that when the first raid gear released, everything was so easy to craft that you didn't even need to pentameld anything from day one. Although it is nice to go into day 1 of a new patch with pentamelded gear ready, the offset is that you would have to spend so much skill in advance and guess that the pentameld is going to be required in order for you to craft the gear. So if they do the same thing that they did in Endwalker and make the first raid tier gear really easy to make, then the issue here is that because it's easily craftable, more people will be making it, meaning more items will be on the market board, meaning the items going to be cheaper in general. Again, this is exactly what we saw in Endwalker, where on the first 2 or 3 days of the new patch, prices for these items were ridiculously cheap in comparison to previous expansions. So my mindset going into this patch is that I have started to and will continue to stock up on materia for pentamelding. I'll change out my first 2 slots to bis melds before patch day, and then I'll wait to see what stats are required for the new recipes and meld them accordingly. If you have a lot of gil and you don't care and just want to pentameld your bis slots right now, then of course feel free. But if you ask for my advice, then I would say it's best to wait and have your materia stacked up just in case we do need pentamelded gear, and then pentameld accordingly. However, gatherers on the other hand is a bit different. Prior to patch day, I will be pentamelding my gatherer set, and that's mainly because I want the highest perception and gathering stats as possible in order to try and get some good RNG for the nodes, as they will be really expensive in the early part of the expansion. I will include a link in the description for the best in slot builds for both crafters and gatherers, but just to summarize, for gatherers I'll be pentamelding best in slot slots before patch day. For crafters I will be melding first primary slots with best in slot melds, and then waiting to see what stats are required before I decide on pentamelding the rest of the gear. So next, let's look at materia. Materia for all classes should shoot up in price at the start of a new patch, and that's both for combat and trade classes. For those of you that may not know how spirit bonding works, when your gear reaches 100% spirit bond, you can select extract materia from the item to get a free materia. These materials are based on the level of the gear you have equipped. So if you have level 100 gear, then you have a high chance of getting the grade 11 and 12 materia. The rate at which your gear spirit bonds is based on 2 things: the level of content you're doing and the amount of melds that you have in your gear. The more melds you have, for example, if you're pentamelded, then you will significantly increase your spirit bond rate. So if you want to farm materia, spirit bond your gear with cheap melds, and then just make sure to extract materia when it reaches 100%. If you're a crafter, then a really easy way to farm materia is by making the rarefied tacos for orange scripts and then purchase the materia with them. As they are a level 100 recipe, if you are pentamelded and using any buffs such as the spirit bond FC buff, you'll be getting a lot of free materia from spirit bonding your gear whilst also getting orange scripts to purchase more materia with. I'll be stockpiling a lot of these ready for release day, and then we'll either sell them or use them based on which stats are going to be required for the new recipes. At the beginning of Dawntrail, I was selling these materia at around 200k each, because as I mentioned before, the rush for pentamelding is quite overhyped. If you look at the price of materia now, they're currently at around 70k each, so people buying them for insane prices just didn't make sense. And as I mentioned before, I am able to craft everything accessible in the game at this moment in time with the cheap melds that I have. For gatherers, the best way is by orange script farming. So for this, you could either do some spear fishing at level 100, or if you're more lazy like me, then you can just stick a timer on for the orange collectible nodes and farm them when they pop up. I'll leave a link in the description for a good website that I use to track my nodes efficiently. Now for the materials, going by previous patches and expansions, we should see that we will be needing to use the level 96 plus pre-crafted materials for each crafter. If you have all your crafters leveled, then going through your list, look at the level 96 and 98 pre-crafted materials and start stacking on those. At the moment, I'm currently prioritizing making these into HQ materials, and that's because usually high quality pre-crafted materials are always needed in order to get to 100% HQ level for the new gear recipes. This has always been the case and I don't see it changing. So having a stack of these HQ materials will be really good because you will not waste any time having to craft these, and if they are used in the new recipes, then at least you know that they will shoot up in price, so you can either sell them or use them for your crafts. An example of these materials that I've been making, if we quickly have a look, would be the Thunderyard silk for weaver, the Gargantua leather for leather worker, the Rakazna ingot for blacksmith or armorer, the Magnesia whetstones and sanctified waters for alchemist, the Claro walnut lumber for carpenter, black star and white gold ingot for goldsmith. I'll be stocking up on more. I've mostly only mentioned some of the pre-craft materials available to these crafters, but I will be going for all of the ones that are level 96 and 98. Another thing that will be a good thing to stack up on would be bi-color gemstone materials for potential foods. There will be a lot of money to be made with gemstones, as we have already seen at the start of the expansion, and I believe this will continue. Another good thing to do going into patch day, if you're not planning to craft, is by looking for opportunities to make some quick money on materials that are cheap on the market board. For example, as I had leveled my alchemist to 96 quite quickly on the first day of Dawntrail release, I was able to take advantage of looking at which materials we required for the CP potions and noticed that peppermint were on there. Peppermint is an old material, and so these were selling for ridiculously cheap at stacks under 50 gil. I purchased over 2,000 of these on every server that I could, buying everything up to 50 gil, and in a few days they shot up to 2k each. This is just an example of taking advantage early. Look at what materials are needed for these new crafts, especially the foods and potions, as they will continuously sell throughout the raid tier, and then just buy whatever materials that you can that may be listed for cheap initially. These will almost always shoot up in price in the first few hours of the patch, but if you're really quick, you can make some really good profit. Now for the last section, we'll talk about food. So to keep this quick, I will be stockpiling the crafting foods, the potions and the gathering foods, as these will be a must-have in order to hit stats required to craft and gather the new stuff. So to be precise, mostly I'll be making the Renique steaks, the salmon jerkies, the Craftsman Tisane, and then also the stuffed peppers. I would also suggest looking at these material lists and just keeping some of these materials on the side come patch day. We will then have a better understanding of what is best in slot and if they are required for any of the new recipes too, which they most likely will. And that brings our preparation video to an end. So yeah, these are just the methods that I will be focusing on going into patch day. There will be other key methods that people may be doing that I haven't mentioned. Feel free to share what you're doing in the comments below, and please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.